We all face criticism at some point in our lives, whether it's from a colleague, a boss, a friend, or even a stranger. It's a part of the journey, but for many of us, it's also one of the hardest parts of that journey. Why? Because criticism, more often than not, triggers an emotional response, anger, frustration, or defensiveness. But here's the truth. How we respond to criticism can shape our growth, our relationships, and ultimately our success. So how do we handle it without letting it control us? We often encounter criticism in both our personal and professional lives, and it can stir up intense emotions. Anger, frustration, and defensiveness tend to surface almost immediately when someone critiques our work, decisions, or actions. It's easy to take criticism personally, to feel like it's a reflection of who we are as individuals. But if we can shift our perspective, we can transform how we view criticism and in turn how we respond to it. At its core, criticism isn't a personal attack, it's an opportunity for growth. The problem arises when we automatically make it about us. We assume that because someone has pointed out a flaw or a mistake, they're attacking our character, our intelligence, or our worth. But this kind of thinking only clouds our judgment and prevents us from seeing the true value of the feedback. If we take a step back and look at criticism as a tool designed to help us improve, we can approach it with a much healthier mindset. Think of it like a mirror. A mirror doesn't judge us, it simply reflects what it sees. Criticism is much the same. It reflects areas where we can improve. It doesn't define who we are as a person. When someone points out something that could be better, it's a reflection of the task, the idea, or the outcome, not a judgment of our character. This distinction is crucial because it helps us detach emotionally from the feedback, making it easier to process and learn from it. When we make criticism about us as people, we become defensive. We feel the need to protect our identity, to justify our actions, and to explain ourselves. But what if, instead of reacting defensively, we asked ourselves, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to get better? When we approach criticism with curiosity instead of defensiveness, we unlock the potential for real growth. The key is to separate the criticism from our sense of self-worth. A piece of feedback, no matter how it's delivered, doesn't diminish our value. It's simply pointing out an area where we can grow and evolve. By shifting our perspective, we start to see criticism as an opportunity rather than a threat. This shift allows us to embrace feedback as part of the learning process rather than something to be feared or avoided. Growth doesn't happen without feedback. It doesn't happen without acknowledging areas that need improvement. The most successful people, those who continually develop and achieve their goals, are the ones who understand this fundamental truth. Criticism is necessary for progress. Without it, we would remain stagnant, unaware of our blind spots or shortcomings. When we stop seeing criticism as a personal attack, we open ourselves up to learning. We begin to appreciate the different viewpoints others bring to the table. Criticism isn't just a one-way street, it's an opportunity for a conversation. We can engage with those who offer feedback and learn from their experiences, knowledge, and perspectives. This mindset fosters collaboration and helps us see how we can contribute to creating something better together. Rather than seeing criticism as an obstacle to our ego, we start to view it as a stepping stone toward excellence. Furthermore, shifting our perspective helps us build resilience. Life is full of setbacks, challenges, and yes, criticism. The ability to face these things without crumbling is a skill that serves us well. Resilience isn't about never facing criticism. It's about how we respond to it. If we can stay grounded and objective, even when faced with tough feedback, we become stronger and more adaptable. We develop the mental toughness necessary to navigate through difficult situations and emerge on the other side wiser and more capable. So the next time you find yourself on the receiving end of criticism, pause and reflect on this. It's not about you as a person. It's about how you can improve the work, the idea, or the outcome. When we shift our perspective in this way, criticism no longer has the power to undermine our confidence or sense of self. Instead, it becomes a valuable resource, guiding us toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Embrace criticism with an open mind and allow it to be a catalyst for positive change. When criticism is delivered, our first instinct might be to defend ourselves, to explain our actions, or to justify the decisions that led to the feedback. It's a natural human reaction. We want to protect our image and ensure that others understand our intentions. However, this instinct to defend often leads to conflict, not resolution. Instead of helping us grow, it can lead to unnecessary tension and misunderstandings. What if, instead of immediately jumping into defense mode, we took a different approach, one that seeks clarity rather than conflict? Seeking clarity means that when we receive criticism, we don't immediately react with a rebuttal or a defensive argument. Instead, we pause and choose to approach the situation with curiosity and an open mind. This is the first step in transforming criticism into a valuable learning opportunity. Rather than viewing the feedback as an attack on our abilities or intentions, we choose to ask questions to better understand the reasoning behind it. When we seek clarity, we invite a conversation rather than a confrontation. Criticism can sometimes feel like an accusation, especially if it's not delivered with care or tact. But if we approach it as an opportunity to learn and understand, we can diffuse the tension before it escalates. Rather than focusing on what feels like a personal attack, we ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? What is the underlying concern or suggestion? These questions turn the conversation into one where both sides can engage in a constructive dialogue, focusing on the issue at hand rather than the emotions or egos involved. It's essential to remember that feedback is often shaped by the perspective of the person offering it. They might have a different set of experiences, expectations, or priorities that influence their view. Rather than assuming their criticism is an indictment of our worth, we can approach the situation by saying, I want to understand where you're coming from. This mindset allows us to create space for mutual respect and understanding. It opens the door for collaboration and even helps us build stronger relationships by showing that we value the other person's perspective. Sometimes criticism can be vague or unclear, making it difficult to know exactly what needs to change. Instead of filling in the gaps with our own assumptions or jumping to conclusions, we can take a moment to ask specific questions that will help us understand the feedback more clearly. For example, instead of replying with, I don't think that's right, we might ask, could you give me an example of what you mean? Or what would a better approach look like in your eyes? These kinds of questions not only give us more insight into the feedback, but also demonstrate our willingness to learn and improve. In addition, seeking clarity can help us avoid misunderstanding the intent behind the criticism. Feedback can sometimes be delivered in a way that comes across as harsh or blunt, but that doesn't necessarily mean the person is trying to be hurtful. It's possible that the critic's tone or delivery isn't ideal, but the substance of the feedback is still valuable. By asking questions like, what are the specific areas I need to focus on, we get to the heart of the matter without allowing emotion to cloud our judgment. We focus on the content, not the delivery. Seeking clarity also helps us gain perspective. When we ask for clarification, we create an opportunity for the critic to explain themselves further, giving us a better understanding of their viewpoint. This allows us to see beyond our own emotional reaction and understand the bigger picture. Instead of focusing solely on defending ourselves or reacting in anger, we shift our attention to the solution and the possibility of improvement. Moreover, when we choose to seek clarity instead of conflict, we foster a more positive and productive environment. This approach sets a tone of openness and cooperation, which encourages future feedback and fosters trust. People are more likely to provide us with constructive criticism if they feel that their insights will be received thoughtfully and with a willingness to grow. Ultimately, seeking clarity rather than conflict is about embracing the opportunity to learn, grow, and improve. It's about moving from a mindset of defensiveness to one of curiosity and collaboration. By doing so, we transform criticism into a valuable resource, one that helps us become better versions of ourselves. It's not about proving that we are right or that we don't need to change. It's about recognizing that no matter how skilled or accomplished we are, there is always room for improvement, and criticism is one of the best tools to help us get there. When we receive criticism, it's easy to be consumed by our emotions. Whether the feedback is harsh, unexpected, or simply difficult to hear, our initial response can often be one of defensiveness, frustration, or even anger. These emotional reactions are completely natural. After all, nobody enjoys being criticized. However, if we allow these emotions to guide our response, we risk shutting down a valuable opportunity for growth and communication. Instead, responding with empathy rather than emotion can transform how we handle criticism and ultimately help us improve. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. It means putting ourselves in their shoes, trying to see the situation from their perspective, and acknowledging their experience. This doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they say, but it allows us to engage with their feedback in a way that is thoughtful, constructive, and focused on the content of the message rather than the delivery. When we respond emotionally to criticism, we tend to view the feedback through a personal lens. We interpret it as an attack on our abilities, our intelligence, or even our character. This emotional reaction is rooted in fear of being judged, fear of failing, or fear of losing respect. But if we let fear dictate our response, we miss the chance to engage in a productive dialogue. We may become defensive, dismissive, or even confrontational, which only deepens the divide between ourselves and the person offering the feedback. On the other hand, responding with empathy allows us to detach from the initial emotional reaction and focus on the message itself. It requires us to step back, take a deep breath, and recognize that the person providing the criticism is likely trying to help us in some way, even if their approach isn't perfect. When we listen to criticism with an empathetic mindset, we can better understand the intention behind the feedback, whether it's to help us improve, point out a mistake, or offer a different perspective. This understanding helps us process the feedback more effectively and respond in a way that fosters growth. Empathy also allows us to respond thoughtfully. Rather than reacting impulsively or defending ourselves, we can take a moment to reflect on the feedback and consider its validity. For example, we might say, "I see where you're coming from, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I'll take some time to think about how I can improve." This response acknowledges the person's perspective while demonstrating a willingness to learn and grow. It shows that we value their input even if it's difficult to hear, and that we are open to making changes based on their feedback. Additionally, responding with empathy helps to create an environment of trust and respect. When we react with understanding and compassion, we build stronger, more positive relationships. People are more likely to offer us honest and constructive feedback in the future if they feel that their insights will be received with empathy rather than defensiveness. This creates a cycle of continuous improvement where feedback is seen as a tool for mutual growth rather than a threat to our self-esteem. Another key benefit of responding with empathy is that it helps us to remain calm and composed even when the criticism feels harsh or unfair. When we react emotionally, we may say things we don't mean or escalate the situation unnecessarily. But when we choose empathy, we stay grounded in the conversation, which helps to keep the tone respectful and the discussion productive. This approach can even help diffuse tense situations and turn a potentially negative exchange into an opportunity for collaboration and problem solving. Empathy also gives us the space to ask questions and seek clarification. Instead of immediately jumping to conclusions or assuming we know what the other person means, we can ask them to explain their feedback further. For example, we might say, "Can you give me an example of what you mean?" Or, "What do you think I could do differently next time?" By responding this way, we demonstrate that we are truly trying to understand their perspective and that we value their input. This not only improves the quality of the feedback we receive, but also shows that we are committed to improving. Ultimately, responding with empathy rather than emotion is about recognizing that criticism is not an attack on our worth or character, but an opportunity to improve. It's about creating space for growth, learning, and meaningful dialogue. By choosing empathy, we can process criticism in a constructive way, build stronger relationships, and use feedback to become better versions of ourselves. When we listen with empathy and respond thoughtfully, we turn what could be a negative experience into a powerful catalyst for positive change. Criticism is an inevitable part of life. Whether we're pursuing a personal goal, building a career, or simply trying to improve in any aspect of our lives, we will encounter feedback that isn't always easy to hear. For many, criticism can feel like a setback, a blow to their confidence, or a sign that they've failed. However, if we shift our perspective, we can see criticism for what it truly is, an essential part of the journey toward growth and success. The road to success is rarely smooth. It's full of challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt. Along the way, we make mistakes, take risks, and encounter situations where things don't go as planned. In these moments, criticism can be a powerful tool to guide us back on track. It provides us with insights, reveals areas where we need improvement, and pushes us to refine our approach. Without criticism, we would lack the feedback necessary to evaluate our progress and make the necessary adjustments. The reality is that nobody becomes great at something without facing criticism. Think about the most successful people in any field, the athletes, the artists, the entrepreneurs. They didn't achieve greatness by avoiding feedback or by thinking they were perfect from the start. They faced countless critiques, corrections, and challenges. But instead of seeing criticism as a sign of failure, they viewed it as an opportunity to grow. Each piece of feedback, no matter how tough, contributed to their development and ultimately led them to success. Criticism is not an endpoint, it's a step in the process. It's a way to measure where we are, understand where we need to improve, and make the necessary changes. Without criticism, we could easily continue down a path that leads nowhere, or worse, towards stagnation. In fact, the absence of criticism might indicate that we're not pushing ourselves hard enough or stepping out of our comfort zone. If we're not being challenged or receiving feedback, we might be playing it too safe and avoiding opportunities for growth. The key to handling criticism is understanding that it is not a reflection of our worth as individuals. Too often, we internalize criticism and believe that it speaks to our abilities or our character. But criticism is about the work, the process, or the outcome, not about who we are as people. It's about recognizing that there is always room to improve and that nobody is perfect. We are all constantly evolving, and feedback is part of that evolution. In many ways, criticism acts as a mirror. It reflects the areas where we need to improve and helps us see things that we might not have noticed on our own. It can be uncomfortable to look into that mirror and face our shortcomings, but doing so allows us to see the full picture. It gives us the clarity we need to adjust our actions, develop new skills, and become better at what we do. Just like a sculptor chisels away at a block of marble to reveal a masterpiece, criticism chips away at our flaws, helping us become more refined versions of ourselves. One of the most important aspects of embracing criticism is learning how to detach it from our sense of self-worth. It's easy to get defensive or take things personally when someone points out a flaw, but we must remember that criticism is meant to help us improve, not to tear us down. It's not an attack on our abilities or our value as a person. It's simply feedback that shows us how we can do better next time. When we can view criticism through this lens, it becomes easier to accept, and we are more likely to take it to heart rather than reacting emotionally. Criticism also helps us build resilience. The more we encounter feedback, especially tough feedback, the more we learn how to handle it constructively. We develop the emotional strength to accept criticism with grace and use it as motivation to do better. Resilience is not about avoiding setbacks or hardships. It's about how we respond to them. When we learn to view criticism as a tool for growth, we become more adaptable and better equipped to face the challenges that come our way. Ultimately, criticism is an essential part of the journey toward achieving anything meaningful. It's not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be embraced. Without it, we would be left in the dark about how we can improve, and we would miss out on the opportunity to become better versions of ourselves. So the next time you face criticism, remember that it's not a roadblock. It's a stepping stone on the path to growth, improvement, and success. Embrace it, learn from it, and use it to fuel your journey forward. When we receive criticism, one of the biggest challenges we face is separating the message from the messenger. It's human nature to be influenced by the person delivering the feedback, whether we like them, trust them, or agree with them. However, allowing the messenger's tone, delivery, or relationship to impact how we receive the message can cloud our judgment and prevent us from truly benefiting from the feedback. To make the most of criticism, it's essential to separate the message from the messenger and focus on the content of the feedback, not the person delivering it. The first step in separating the message from the messenger is to recognize that the criticism is about the work, the idea, or the outcome, not about us as individuals. When we take criticism personally, it becomes much harder to process constructively. If we view the feedback as a reflection of our own worth, we're more likely to react emotionally, becoming defensive, angry, or discouraged. This emotional response, while natural, prevents us from extracting the value from the criticism. We're too focused on how the feedback makes us feel rather than on how it can help us improve. To counter this, we need to make a conscious effort to detach ourselves from the feedback and focus on the content. The criticism is a reflection of the work we've done, not a reflection of who we are as people. If someone critiques our performance, it's not a statement about our abilities or our character. It's an opportunity to learn and grow, regardless of who is delivering the message. The challenge lies in seeing past the individual's delivery and understanding the core of their feedback. If we can do that, we're much more likely to benefit from the critique. Another important aspect of separating the message from the messenger is recognizing that everyone has their own perspective. People bring their experiences, biases, and preferences to every interaction, including when they offer feedback. Just because someone's tone is harsh or their delivery is blunt doesn't mean their feedback isn't valuable. The feedback itself is based on the person's perspective or observations, and those observations are valid even if the delivery is less than ideal. In fact, by separating the message from the messenger, we can take a more objective look at the feedback and ask ourselves, what can I learn from this, instead of focusing on how it was delivered. Sometimes, criticism comes from people we don't fully trust or respect. In these situations, it can be even more difficult to take the feedback seriously. We may dismiss their words out of hand or immediately reject the criticism, simply because of our feelings toward the person giving it. But just because we don't like or trust the messenger doesn't mean their message is invalid. It's crucial to remember that feedback can come from anyone, and even if the messenger doesn't have the best delivery or the best relationship with us, their feedback may still have value. When we separate the message from the messenger, we open ourselves up to learning from all sources, even those we might otherwise disregard. It's also important to note that not all criticism is created equal. Not every piece of feedback is equally constructive or helpful. However, when we separate the message from the messenger, we are in a better position to evaluate the feedback on its own merits. Rather than reacting immediately to the tone or delivery, we can take a step back and consider the actual content of the message. Is the feedback valid? Is there something we can learn from it? Does it highlight areas where we can improve? By focusing on the message itself, we can make more objective judgments about the feedback, even if the person delivering it isn't someone we particularly like or agree with. One of the most powerful benefits of separating the message from the messenger is that it helps us grow emotionally and professionally. It allows us to develop resilience and maturity in how we respond to feedback. When we learn to take criticism without reacting defensively or personally, we are better equipped to handle all types of feedback, whether it's from a colleague, a supervisor, a friend, or even a stranger. We develop a more balanced and open-minded approach to criticism, which ultimately leads to greater personal growth and improvement. In addition, separating the message from the messenger creates space for constructive conversations. When we focus on the feedback itself rather than the person delivering it, we're more likely to engage in a productive dialogue. We can ask questions, seek clarification, and work together to find solutions or improvements. This approach builds trust and fosters collaboration, as it demonstrates a willingness to listen, learn, and grow, regardless of any personal biases we may have toward the person giving the feedback. Ultimately, separating the message from the messenger is about recognizing that criticism is a tool for growth, not an attack on our character. It's about focusing on the value of the feedback itself, rather than being influenced by the emotions or relationships involved. By doing so, we can embrace criticism with an open mind, learn from it, and continue to grow both personally and professionally. Self-awareness is one of the most powerful tools we can develop in our personal and professional lives. It is the ability to understand our emotions, actions, and reactions and how they impact the world around us. When we practice self-awareness, we gain a deeper understanding of who we are, what drives us, and how we can navigate challenges more effectively. It's a skill that not only improves our decision-making, but also enhances our relationships and overall well-being. Practicing self-awareness is a continual process of reflection, observation, and growth. One of the key aspects of self-awareness is recognizing our emotions and understanding where they come from. Often we experience emotions such as frustration, anger, or anxiety without fully understanding why we feel that way. These emotions can sometimes drive us to react impulsively without thinking about the consequences. By becoming more aware of our emotions, we can start to recognize the triggers that cause them. For example, we might notice that we feel frustrated when we're under pressure or anxious when facing uncertainty. Once we identify these triggers, we can work on managing our emotions more effectively. Instead of reacting immediately, we can pause, reflect, and choose a more mindful response. Self-awareness also involves understanding our strengths and weaknesses. By recognizing what we excel at, we can focus on building those strengths and leveraging them to our advantage. On the other hand, acknowledging our weaknesses allows us to work on improving them or finding ways to mitigate their impact. For instance, if we know that we struggle with time management, we can take steps to organize our day more effectively. We might set clearer goals, prioritize tasks, or delegate responsibilities when necessary. Self-awareness helps us take ownership of our abilities and areas for improvement, making it easier to set realistic goals and achieve personal growth. In addition to understanding ourselves, self-awareness requires being mindful of how our actions affect others. We often move through life with a focus on our own needs, but practicing self-awareness means considering how our behavior impacts the people around us. Are we communicating effectively? Are we being empathetic toward others' feelings? Are we behaving in a way that aligns with our values? By reflecting on our interactions, we can gain insights into how we're perceived by others and make adjustments where necessary. For example, if we realize that we tend to interrupt others in conversations, we can work on listening more attentively and giving others the space to speak. This not only improves our relationships, but also fosters a deeper connection with the people in our lives. Self-awareness also involves being honest with ourselves. It's easy to become complacent or to deny our flaws. But true self-awareness requires us to look at ourselves without judgment. We must be willing to acknowledge our imperfections and confront difficult truths. This can be uncomfortable at times, but it's a crucial step in our personal development. By being honest with ourselves about our shortcomings, we open the door to growth and improvement. For example, if we recognize that we have a tendency to procrastinate, we can take steps to address it rather than brushing it aside or making excuses. This level of honesty with ourselves helps us become more accountable and proactive in our journey toward personal growth. One of the benefits of practicing self-awareness is that it helps us make better decisions. When we are aware of our emotions, values, and motivations, we are less likely to make impulsive or reactive choices. Instead, we can approach situations with a clear, rational mindset. For example, if we know that we tend to be impulsive when we're stressed, we can pause and take a moment to assess the situation before making a decision. This ability to pause and reflect leads to more thoughtful, informed choices that align with our long-term goals. Self-awareness also improves our ability to cope with stress and challenges. Life is full of unexpected twists and difficult situations, but when we practice self-awareness, we become better equipped to handle them. We learn to recognize when we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, and we develop coping mechanisms to manage these emotions. Whether it's taking a few deep breaths, going for a walk, or talking to a friend, self-awareness helps us identify what we need in the moment to regain our balance and continue moving forward. The practice of self-awareness also allows us to cultivate empathy and understanding for others. When we understand our own emotions and motivations, we become more attuned to the emotions and experiences of those around us. This empathy strengthens our relationships and helps us navigate social dynamics with more grace and understanding. We become better communicators, listeners, and collaborators, which in turn fosters a more positive and supportive environment for everyone. Ultimately, practicing self-awareness is a journey, not a destination. It's about making small, consistent efforts to reflect on our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and using that insight to improve our lives. It's a skill that requires time, patience, and a willingness to grow. By becoming more self-aware, we gain the clarity and insight needed to make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and live more authentically. The more we practice self-awareness, the more empowered we become to create the life we truly want to live.